Good morning, everyone. Today's session is we're going to be talking about personal budgeting with a little bit of investing advice at the end, just for those that have a few extra dollars and are wondering what to do with it. Again, as we had yesterday, we're not overly technical. We just want people to be more aware of their money. We just want people to think about what goes in, what comes out. Not everybody out there is an accountant or an accountant wannabe. I don't understand why not, but at the same time, we're going to try and keep the accounting jargon down to a minimum and just concentrate on some of the basics. There we go. Just a little bit about myself. If you were on the call yesterday, you heard this blurb, but I'll just repeat it just for anyone that may not have been. My name is Peter Smith. I'm a CPA, certified or chartered professional accountant with over 35 years of public practice experience and with a concentration on First Nations and Indigenous business enterprises, and 20 years as a partner in a national accounting firm. Enough about me, and we'll go on to our first topic, which is personal budgeting. As far as personal budgeting goes, you can't really start talking about personal budgeting unless you've had a chat about wants and needs. And sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish between a want and a need. People have somewhat different perceptions on what these things actually are, but in very basic terms, a need is something that is essential to your day-to-day living. And some examples of needs may be groceries. It may be rent. It may be basic clothing. Keeping in mind that basic clothing doesn't include that $200 designer jean that you wanted off the internet. Basic clothing is socks and underwear. If you go to wants, a want is something that you can live without, and that is basically not necessary to survive. And examples of wants might include a video game, or lunch at McDonald's, or that newest pair of designer jeans. All of these things are wants because these are things that you want, but you don't necessarily need to survive. Now, those are very black and white, the examples that I've given you, but there are other things that sort of fall into both categories, depending on who you are and what your perception of life is. If you talk about things like cell phones or computers, those types of things could fall into both categories. Some people feel that a cell phone is definitely a need and something that is essential to living, whereas other people can do without. The same thing with computers. If you're a student, a computer is definitely a need. It's something that you need in order to do your assignments and to do your research. Whereas if you're not a student, a computer may be optional. In today's day and age, it's hard to see that, but computers can, in some instances, actually be a want and not a need. So before you actually get into the budgeting process, you do have to have a really good understanding of what your needs and wants are, because at the end of the day, a need comes before a want in all situations. There's probably too many people out there that are living for the moment. And students have to get away from that. They have to make good money decisions, because if you're away at school and you're living on your own, you have to realize that certain things, i.e. your needs, have to come before your wants. We want students to develop good money skills at an early age, so it'll help you through your entire life. And we don't want you living for the moment, because if you live for the moment, you're just going to get in trouble financially. You always have to think about tomorrow. You always have to think about next week. You always have to think about next month, because as you get older and move into full-time employment, you end up with a lot of needs and a lot of things that have to be paid on a very regular basis. So you have to be aware of all of that. So basically, if a student is going to be financially successful, they need to learn how to plan and to budget their money. They have to be aware of how much things cost and how much you're actually spending. You can't basically just spend until the ATM says you don't have any money left. That is not a good plan. Mind you, that's something that a lot of people actually work with, and we don't want that. We want people to learn how to track their expenses, to be able to achieve goals and plan for the future. Just by definition, and again, trying to keep away from the actual jargon, a budget is a plan that includes your wants and needs. It keeps track of the money that you earn and you spend, and it helps you organize your expenses so you know exactly where your money is going. And more importantly, it helps you control your expenses so you know at any point in time what you have money for and what you don't. So if you are to prepare a budget, some key items are on the second half of this slide. A good budget will be written down, whether it be electronically or otherwise. If you don't write it down, you don't have a budget, simply because you haven't made the commitment. You have to write it down, and you have to actually think about it, and be able to refer to it at a point in the future to see whether or not you've achieved what you've put down. A budget is going to cover all your needs. Like I said, needs comes before wants. So a budget is going to cover all your needs, and it's going to allow for some of your wants. It's not, life is pretty boring if you don't have any wants. So definitely when you do your budgeting, you have to make sure that there is some in there. But at the same time, you have to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room as well. You can't budget every last penny. You have to make sure that there's a wiggle room in your budget to basically expect the unexpected. You never quite know exactly what's going to happen or whether or not something is going to cost a little bit more or a little bit less. So you do have to have that little bit of wiggle room. And the last point on a good budget is you have to allow to save for larger purchases. If you don't save, you're either going to end up using credit cards or some other means to buy these larger purchases, and it's just going to cost you money at the end of the day in interest and charges. So if you put in your budget a line to save for certain things, it's only going to help you in the long run. Now, when you're creating a budget, again, keeping very simple, you basically just list all of your incomes, money coming in. That income could be a part-time job. It could be a student allowance if you're going to university. It could be some government subsidies that you might be receiving, or rebate checks for things like GST or client incentive or child tax credits, that sort of stuff. You have to list all of your incomes in order to be able to determine how much money you actually have to spend. Then you have to list your savings. What, at the end of the day, do you want to save for? And these are normally larger purchases. And in the example that we're going to look at, we've got a student that's saving for a computer. So things that you can't afford right away, but you do want to buy at some point in the future. Then you list all of your expenses, dividing them between wants and needs, keeping in mind that the needs come first, the wants come second, but you do want to try to accommodate as many as you possibly can. And then you have to identify a time frame for a budget. A budget without a time frame is really not a budget at all. So you're budgeting, you could budget for a year, or you could budget for a month, or you could budget for a week. Normally what I tell people when they're budgeting is you normally budget for a year, but at the same time you divide it by months. So it's something that's very manageable and something that you could see. Most people can't see too far into the future, so you don't want to go any further than that. Now, here's an example of a budget. This is John C. Let's say, for argument's sake, John C. is 18 years old. He's living at home. He's not going to school yet, but he does plan to go to university next year. So his budget would be very simple. On the income side of things, he would have a part-time job that generates $350 a month. And he has some other income, whatever it may be, of an additional $50. So we've got total income of $450. So that's one side of your budget. The other side of your budget is your expenses or your expenditures that you're going to spend over the course of the month. And under expenses, John has a cell phone bill. Now, a cell phone to John is probably a need, simply because most 18-year-olds need a cell phone in order to communicate and do whatever they have to do. And at the same time, he's got a cell phone bill and it has to be paid. So it does fall under that need category. The second one is transportation. John sometimes has to budget for transportation, whether it be a couple Ubers, maybe a tank of or half a tank of gas for his dad's car, maybe a bus pass. And that would probably be considered a need as well, because these are things that he has to pay for. And then you get into some of the wants. You've got snacks. John is still living at home. He's not paying for basic groceries, but if he wants a bag of chips and pop, then he's going to have to pay for it himself. The same with restaurants. Restaurants, I think I spelled restaurant wrong, but that's fine. Restaurants are definitely a want. Simply because it's not something that you actually have to have. But we are budgeting $75 for that, and clothing another $100. And like I said, clothing can go both ways depending on exactly what you're purchasing. So we have total expenses, of $350. So that leaves us with $100 left. And because John is going to university next year, he is putting that money away. He is saving that money because he knows that when he goes to university, he's going to need a new computer. So he's got savings of $100. So this budget basically has all of the basic components that you're looking for. It has the income, all of the different income sources. It has the expenses. It has the savings. And we have set it for a determined period of time, which is basically the month of January 2025. So that is the basic components of a budget. And that's all that I really want to bring across today, just to give you an idea of what types of things you should be jotting down, and the fact that if you do write it down, it is going to be much more effective in the long run, because you will be looking back at it wondering whether or not you've actually achieved what you have written down. Now, just turning the page and going on to the next topic, saving for the future. And this is part and parcel of investing. But the first step in investing is always to have a rainy day fund. The first cornerstone of investing is having this fund simply because it's necessary. It's basically money that you need to get through tough times. Everybody should have a rainy day fund. I'm not saying exactly how much money that should be, but you should be putting away something that you feel is necessary to get you through a month or two. Now, when you're putting this money away, you want to make sure that it's safe. So you basically just put it in a separate bank account, a separate savings account. You don't want to put it into anything risky, just something separate and something that you can see on a regular basis that is going up on a nice gradual basis. And most people actually do set up a separate bank account for their rainy day fund, just so they know that that money has been set aside and it is there just in case. And most people, you normally can't put a lump sum amount in unless you get a windfall of some sort, but make monthly contributions, whatever you could afford. You throw it into this separate account. And then once you have that rainy day fund, you can actually start investing. But rainy day funds are critical because one person once told me that most people are 3 or 4 paychecks away from homelessness, which basically means that if you have no savings and something happens and you lose your job, how long can you survive before you get evicted, or how long can you survive before you lose your house? You have to have that rainy day fund to protect you in those situations, because you don't want to go down that hole, because it just gets worse and worse and worse. And this is a very easy solution. Just have a little bit set aside just in case. Now, once you do have your rainy day fund, and you're thinking, well, I've heard a lot about investing, but I don't really know exactly what to invest in. The first thing you have to say to yourself is, what is my risk factor? How much risk do I want to take? Because whenever you invest in something, there is that element of risk, and everybody has a different risk tolerance. And in normal terms and in general terms, if you have a higher risk investment, it tends to generate a better return. And if you have a lower risk investment, it tends to generate a lower return. But you have to remember that the opposite is always true, or is also true. So if you have a high risk investment, you have a higher risk of actually losing money. Whereas if you have a low risk investment, you have a lower risk of losing some money. So it goes both ways when you're talking about risk. And at the end of the day, everybody has a different risk factor, and you just have to ask yourself, how well do you sleep at night? If you're going to sit up and worry about the money that you've put into whatever investment, then it's not for you. And the other thing that you have to ask yourself is, can you afford to lose it? Because every investment, aside from the very, very safe investments, there is that small chance that you might actually lose your money. So you really have to ask yourself whether or not you can afford to lose it. And if you can't afford to lose your investment or any part of it, then you should be putting your money in a savings account and just leaving it there. Now, there's entire courses on investments and types of investments and what to invest in. Today, I just want to go through some of the basic investments that you might encounter. I'm not condoning one or the other. I'm just going to go through each one of them and give you a little bit of the pros and the cons. First off, we have GICs, treasury bills, and savings accounts. GICs are guaranteed investment certificates, and these types of investments are very safe. You get a certain amount of interest but the principal portion of that investment or what you've put in is very safe. We have stocks or shares in larger corporations. This could be shares in things like Microsoft or shares in Nike or shares in the Royal Bank. And these go up and down in value. So they're a little more risky. And some shares are more risky than others. So you really have to know what you're talking about. Bonds are what they call debt instruments, where they you earn interest on these bonds. But instead of the bonds being issued by the banks, they're issued by companies and governments. So they might have a little bit of risk attached to them, but not normally as much as shares do. Mutual funds. Mutual funds came about probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago. They became very popular because a lot of people don't have the time to investigate what shares to basically invest in. And so they go to mutual fund because a mutual fund is a group of shares in several different companies. And the logic behind those mutual funds is that if you have a group of shares in a bunch of different companies, then some of the pluses might offset the minuses, and at the end of the day, your risk is a little bit lower. But again, there's different kinds of mutual funds out there, and you have to know which ones to invest in. Cryptocurrencies. This is something that's popped up over the last 5 years that has become very popular to some people. Everybody's probably heard of the term Bitcoin. Cryptocurrencies are extremely risky. There is no real substance to it, and they're basically based on supply and demand. So it's super risky. Just to give you an example, I know of a fellow that he had a small business, and he did quite well in this business. And over 10 years, he was able to generate about $1 million in savings. And he had his money in stocks and bonds and mostly mutual funds, and was tired of paying all of the fees and stuff that are associated with that. So he decided that he was going to cash in on all of those investments and invest in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. It took him 10 years to generate this money. It took him 3 months to lose it all. That's $1 million. In fact, at the end of the day, he actually owed the investment company $50,000. So he was in the hole $50,000 after 3 months, simply because he really didn't understand, and he was getting into something that was extremely risky. So if you ever think of cryptocurrencies, just say no, because at the end of the day, it's not something that you should be investing in unless you have a lot of money to lose. The last one, casinos. Casinos are a social event. They're not somewhere to make money. It's a really, really bad choice if you think that that's going to be your investment choice. Stay away from them. Or if you are going to the casino, like I said, treat it like a social event and say, well, I've got $20. I'll go, and when it's gone, it's gone. But don't go into a casino on the assumption that you're going to make money and come out ahead, because 9 out of 10 times you're not. You always have to remember that at the end of the day, casinos were built on losers and not winners. So they make money off of you. It's not the other way around. Now, just a little bit on this. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but we did mention in the previous slide that investments do go up and down. But if you go to the last bullet on this slide, a lot of the things that make these investments go up and down are completely out of your control. Just starting from the top, it depends on profits. It depends on predictions. It depends on inflation. It depends on the state of the economy. It depends on decisions made by management. It depends on the competition. These are all things that are completely out of your control. So you have to realize that if you are getting into stocks and bonds, that a lot of this stuff is completely out of your control, and you're just hoping for the best. Now, there are people out there that spend their lives analyzing these things and can help you, but this is where the risk comes in. So you do have to realize that at the end of the day. And just to finish off, just some tips and traps as far as investments go. Number one, never pick your own stocks unless you're very knowledgeable. And that would be 99% of us. You shouldn't be picking your own stocks simply because of the previous slide, all of the things that could go wrong. Number two, never act on a hot tip you heard from your brother's girlfriend's uncle. It does happen where people say, well, I heard from this guy that this is a really good investment. Don't do it. Don't do it, because chances are they probably don't know what they're talking about, or they're trying to make money off of you one way or the other. Number three, never invest if you cannot afford to lose some of it. Like I said, investments go up and down in value, and unless you're in the very, very safe stuff, you have to be willing to have those investments drop every so often. Number four, the internet is often wrong. A lot of the stuff on the internet is crap. It's somebody else's opinion, and at the end of the day, it may be right and it may be wrong. So you can't say, well, I did all of this research on the internet and now I'm confident in buying this stock, because half of that information may not be right. Number five, always be aware of fees and charges. Whenever you're buying stocks and bonds, whether you're selling them, there's always fees attached to that. So if you get into a cycle where you're doing a lot of buying and selling, a lot of your income, a lot of what you've earned can basically go back into fees and charges. So you have to be aware of all of that sort of stuff. The next one we've talked about, and it's a basic concept that everybody should be aware of. The higher the rate of the return, the higher the risk. If someone is telling you that there's an investment out there and you can get 10% or you can get 15%, what they're really telling you is that there's potential for that, but there's also potential for you to lose 10 or 15%. So you have to look at both sides of it. Second to last, if it's too good to be true, it's not true. You just have to keep that in mind, because there's all kinds of salespeople out there promising you the world, and if they are promising you the world, then they're basically only in it for themselves. And finally, you should always invest for the long term. There's a lot of people that do what they call day trading, and they're bouncing back and forth and buying and selling on a daily basis. Leave that to the professionals. If you invest for the long term, ride the ups and the downs, at the end of the day, you should probably be okay. So those are just some tips and traps to end the presentation.